this video is an introduction to Animate with the Countdown Animation project. And we are going to go over quickly the timeline, stage, tools, the library, and the menu. And we're going to go over these in a very basic way. And the timeline is really the start of animation. It kind of gives us our keyframes. It allows us to set the duration, how long we hold on drawings, how you can add or delete frames. We'll go over these in real basic ways. As you get further along, you'll have better comfort level in using the tools to manipulate all the aspects of what Animate has. The layers, we'll really start with just 2 layers, but you can add layers, not unlike Photoshop. And so the menu, we'll talk about keyframes, symbols, how those are important to orchestrate your animation. And so there's many different ways to approach it, and we're going to just go over some of the basic approaches. The stage is where you actually choreograph, where you put all your elements and then have them perform. And we'll talk again about how to place symbols, how to view the stage. You can view it through the clipped parameters, or see the whole entire elements with the border. The library is where you'll store all your symbols and your assets. And then within those symbols, we'll talk about how you can edit and use the tools to draw and paint and manipulate. So this is just a basic summary of everything. And we'll go over these tools in more detail. The brush is what I use the most, but you're more than welcome to experiment and use the pen tool. Whatever you think would be interesting for you to understand. And the flood fill tool. These are all basic elements that I encourage you to explore at a deeper level. So this is really basically an overview, and we're going to go through this step by step. So the file I'll give you will begin, and as we see, we have a blank stage, and we have 2 layers, a foreground and a background. And these are basically what you'll use to start building your work. We have a timeline, and it has all the keyframes that you'll be putting in. And you can insert it through the menu, timeline, and you'll see keyframes, frames. And I'll talk about the difference in a little bit. Now, to start, let's do research. I researched and I found an artist I like, Piet Mondrian, a fine artist, and I'm going to take one of his inspirations, and I'm just going to copy this image. And it's a little different in the PC, but in the Mac, I'll just copy this image right off the internet. And then when I go into Animate, I will actually create a symbol. That's the easiest way for me to really navigate in this world. So I create a new symbol, and this is just going to allow me to make a graphic, and I'll name that symbol Mondrian. It's important to name your assets, because you'll get a bunch of them and you won't know which is what. So once I have that new symbol, I click on it, and it actually opens up its own stage and its own timeline, and that's just another way that you can elaborate on. But see, the timeline layer 1, and it has a blank frame, and I can now paste into this image if I want. And that's just, again, Command V or however you want to do it. And now I have this image as a reference point. And if you select it, you'll see in the library it's a bitmap. I named that bitmap, again, just to disseminate and understand all the different aspects. I won't use a bitmap in my performance, but the bitmap will be in the symbol. Alright, so now I want to create a background image that is not exactly like this, but kind of mimics or is inspired by it. Create 2 layers, because that base layer will be kind of just a template for me. And I'll call it back template. And I'll lock it just so I don't mess with it anymore. It's just important that you understand to lock your layer so you don't mess with it. So now I've got it on that back layer, and I can draw down the top of it. And there's many ways to approach this, and you'll explore these tools. This is a vector-based program, so I'll use a vector square, and I'll have an outline on that vector square, and I will actually have no color. just so I have a border. I just have a basic border, and I can manipulate this further later. But right now I just got a square with a border in it. And then I'm going to now have a color and no line. And this is where I'm going to actually build the verticals and horizontals of my graphic. And as I do this, I want to build this background so it will frame my numbers. So I want to make sure there's enough compositional space in there so that you can see the number within the frame. And this is something that you can explore as you decide what you kind of want to do. And I'd really encourage you, keep your backgrounds basic, keep them simple, just for the sake of learning. You'll get more articulate with your work, and you can do a lot more effective work with it. Keep things simple. That's how I see it. So once I get my lines in there, they touch the border, and now I can flood fill it. And I'll take the picker tool, and that can just start me with the right color. And I'll go ahead with the off-white for the rest of the squares that I need, and then the blue and the yellow are the last two components that I will pick. Alright, so now my background's kind of firmly developed. It's a vector graphic, so that's good because I can take that further. And I can select it, and now I'm going to select the main scene and go back to the main stage. And now I can take a keyframe, and I'll just add a keyframe to my timeline, and that'll be my background layer. And you'll see it, the little circle there means that it's a blank keyframe, and that will be my main starting point. So I drag from the library my symbol, and I drag it to the stage, and as you see, it's not firmly, I want it to go beyond the border of the stage. So I can move it around here, and then I can free transform. And free transform is a key command or an icon there. Q in the Mac, and then modify. In the modify window, you can go to transform, free transform. Many ways to get that tool. Once you have it free transform, you can take one of the handle points and proceed to scale it in any ratio that you want it. So it's great now because I have my stage pretty much clipped, and I can see it how it looks on that stage, the way you would make a film of it. And I can double click on that symbol in the menu in the library, and let's say I wanted to adjust something in here, and I don't like that gold color. So again, you can select that color directly, click the palette window, and now you can change the color. You can make it kind of more to what you think would be appropriate. So it's just either, there's many ways to approach your editing. And I talked about clip to stage. If you go into magnification under view and you click that off, then it gives you the whole canvas, and it shows you the border of the frame, and it just allows you to kind of work outside the clipping. And I don't need the bitmap anymore, so I deleted it from the symbol. Now I've got my background Mondrian symbol, and I kind of like it in the space here. I'm adjusting it according to the border line, and now I can start to add a duration, because it's not even a second. And since you're going to do basically five numbers, I'm going to keep this around 5 seconds. And in my timeline, I go to my fifth frame, or my 5th second, my 7th frame, and I click it, and I insert a keyframe. So or a frame. The frame actually just prolongs the keyframe. You want one keyframe, and then you want it to extend all the way to 5 seconds. You can shorten or lengthen the frames according to what you want it to be, but you'll get more comfortable navigating. It can get a little tricky at first. So now I'm going to just add my numbers, and I'm going to start with a new keyframe on the foreground layer. I lock my background, and my foreground layer now is active. I create a new symbol, and this symbol will be number 5, since I'll count backwards. You can do a count up if you want, but a countdown will start with 5. And now I create that symbol, and it brings me into that symbol stage where now I can decide what colors I want, and I can decide what tool I want. And the brush is really my favorite tool. And you can go into properties, and you can adjust the thickness of it. You can adjust the sensitivity. And it really is, if you have a tablet, this is really a wonderful tool. It really helps you develop some style and some personality to your art. And by drawing the 5, it turns into a nice vector image. And then I can flood fill it with any color, and I can change that color at any given time. So for now, I'll just add the blue. Now I go back to my stage. Again, click back on your scene and your main scene, and you can go to your library and number 5. I will now drag it into that keyframe. It'll automatically update it on that. See there? It's the 5, and then the 5 is on the stage. And you again free transform it. You can give it as much dimension or squash it. You can change the pivot point on it, and we'll talk about why that's important later. But now we're going to just put it in there, and then we need to add time to it. So adding a frame, adding frames to it. And we'll go to the first second, which is the 15th frame, and we can insert keyframe. Oh, sorry, frame again. I messed up. Insert a frame, and that will give you a second. And then you can drag it. You can drag that, the end point of that, and you can middle mouse click it or command mouse click it, and it will allow you to drag it back and forth. This is something you might want to mess around with. There are ways to adjust the duration of it. My favorite is shifting or pressing F5, but that will allow you to just add frames one by one, but you can multiply it, and shifting it will decrease it. That on the Mac is the F5 command. Mac PC will have probably a different command, but still, I find it very effective in getting the exact duration I want. For now, it's 1 second. The 5's on there for roughly 1 second. So we'll create number 4. We go to the 16th frame. We insert a new keyframe or a blank keyframe, really, which is more important because then it just makes it empty. And then we can now insert a symbol, and that new symbol will be number 4. Go, and it takes you right to the 4's canvas, and it will put it right in that upper corner on the main scene. So again, double click on that 4, and now I can just start to draw. And I'll use another tool like the pen tool, and that pen tool has different properties, but it still gives you some benefits that you can explore even further. Just kind of gives you one consistent line, and you can still flood fill in it. So I gave it a dark color because it's going to go on a light background. I click on that scene to get to my main stage. I'm on my keyframe, and I put the 4 and I place it where it needs to be. And now you see how the 4 and the 5 swap out on that 16th frame. I add a second worth of frames to 4, and 4 and 5 now kind of perform accordingly. When you double click on that image, it will take you right to it on the stage, so it just allows you to do some fast edits. Again, very intuitive once you start getting comfortable. So we'll speed up a little bit, and we're going to start adding our third frame, our third keyframe, and our third symbol, which happens to be number 3. I pick a yellow color, and now I'm going back to my brush tool, and I'm just going to add just a thin line to it. Drag it into the place where it needs to be. It's too big, but that's fine. It's a vector art, so vector art can be manipulated without losing quality. And we are now ready to add the frames to 3, so it goes to the 4th second. All right, so here we see my numbers. They're progressing around the frame. And we were coming down to the last 2 digits. So this number is going to look a little different, and you'll probably really want to do some research on how you want your numbers to be, how they look. And that will take time. It'll take time for you to kind of get comfortable with the tools. So always, don't be too critical of your abilities. Just this is really about you trying to navigate the tools with the timeline and the keyframes. So I got my one. It's going to be in that last yellow square, and I have basically all my frames in place. I play it, and it's playing the way it should, and I like the way it looks. Keep in mind I can do more with it, but now I'm going to export it. And when you export your movie, in the Mac you can do QuickTime. In the PC you have to do other different aspects of it. So it's going to be a little different, but for me, if I export to video, it gives me all the basic parameters from the guidelines that I have, and I can just simply export, and it will now render out a QuickTime movie of the animation. And it's really all I need. I can edit that further in Premiere or After Effects. But for other ways to do this, you can export as a shockwave movie, though that can be weird. You need plugins to make that work. But it works for testing sometimes. I do this as well, and it just renders out a low memory file that I can play. For a lot of other people, you can export a sequence, and that sequence then can be opened up in Premiere and be further edited. So a JPEG sequence or a PNG sequence, and that will numerically render out each frame, and that way you can compile it in a video program. That's usually how I do some of my animation to get the best quality of it. But these are ways that you can export your images to get a movie played. As you can see, here they are all laid out. But let's kick on the QuickTime movie just to see how it plays. Just make sure it plays in real time. And it works. It's nothing real fancy, but we'll do this at another level, at another lesson. I'll show you how you can expand and create more effective or a little bit more interesting performances. But really, this is all you need to do. This is the goal of this assignment, is just to learn how to navigate through the timeline, the layers. But just to show you the benefit of a symbol is that you can take the background, keyframe that background, and in the properties in that symbol, you can adjust the colors of it. And it's just another way to further manipulate your animation without redoing a lot of things. And we'll talk about this in the next video in more detail, how you can manipulate further symbols and add more articulation to them, and how you can use the properties of these symbols to create color changes and other different aspects of it. So it's just something to look forward to. When you get more into the interface, this will certainly be something that you will explore at this and beyond. So you can do in-betweens. You can create classic tweens. Once your symbol is changed to a certain level, that is the beauty of doing tweens, is that it will then interpolate or transform from one to the next. And again, it can be used in different ways. So I'll just illustrate why this is important. But for now, really just kind of get the background in one layer, put just one keyframe on it, and keep it consistent for now. And then get your numbers, your assets, and symbols, get them at least broken down. And that will give you the basic foundation to start to the next assignment.